Mmluv. Welcome to Big A Music and Entertainment Radio Station. And I will be promoting a storybook by Edgar Hayes Sr., and that's myself there. And this is what I will be doing throughout sometimes, also doing my music and creating movies. And what I have here right now is a Figment of Imagination storybook, and the title is Believe None of What You Hear, Believe Some of What You See, but believe everything you do because you did it. And this is going to be read and explained as we go, and it's a little humorous and it's touching, but yet it's still a figment of my imagination. And we're going to start off right now with one day a lady walking across the boulevard and she slipped down, but a person passing by her helped her get up, placed her arm around his neck, then he hugged her around the waist, and they began walking to the sidewalk. But she is married, remember that. And her husband has no car, but Pop Goes the Weasel. Y'all heard of Pop Goes the Weasel. That means something didn't happen. Somebody then what? Popped up. Okay. Mr. Lucky Strike Paul Mall appears and sees his wife, Mrs. Shanika Paul Mall, walking and being hugged by someone he did not know. And this is Mr. Lucky Strike reaction. Nigga, get your MFing hands off my wife right now. Mrs. Shanika and Mr. Camel are lying on the ground because Mr. Lucky Strike is fighting with Mr. Camel, Sarah, who was helping Mr. Lucky Strike Paul Mall's wife because her ankle is broke. But now Mrs. Shanika Paul Mall is lying in the boulevard saying, "Stop, stop. He is helping me. I fell and my ankle was broken." Now I'm going to take you into the grand finale. Yes, the grand finale to hear some of the things that wasn't said and talked about or spoken. But understand that this is only a figment of my imagination. And the story goes on with the grand finale. Now let me take you to the grand finale. In the beginning, there are some parts that were not seen. When Mrs. Shanika Paul Mall was being helped across the boulevard, her husband, Mr. Lucky Strike Paul Mall, was at the bus stop on Rampart Street. And his partner, Mr. Always Dipping, was driving by in his car with his wife, Mrs. Cauliflower Dipping. Mr. Always Dipping was driving by in his car with his wife, Mrs. Cauliflower Dipping. First, the Dipping saw Mrs. Paul Mall hugging the strange man as they drove by. But then Mrs. Dipping said, "Look over there on Rampart Street. Is that your partner, Lucky Strikes?" Mr. Always drove over there and asked Lucky Strikes, "Where is Shanika? Did she allow you to go somewhere by yourself on your off day?" Yeah, that's typical men. That's, not so much men, but people do butt in other people's business. But this is Mr. Dipping, always dipping in somebody else's business. Mr. Lucky Strike replied, "Yes, my wife is at her mom's, and I'm on my way over there to give my wife some just because I love you bouquet of flowers." Now that's something nice he was doing for his wife. And all of a sudden come along Mr. Dippins with this here information. Then Mr. Dippins said, no, dawg, I just saw Shanika at the corner of St. Charles and Canal Boulevard with a man hugging her. Mr. Lucky Strike Paul Mall said, and you lying. But Mr. Dippins said, no, you can ask my wife. She brought it to my attention. Now, he using his wife as an alibi to say what he saw and it don't have nothing to do with him. So watch what's going on, what occurs. I love you. Mr. Lucky Strike Palmer said, lying. But Mr. Dippin said, no, you can ask my wife. She brought it to my attention. Before Mr. Palmer could say anything else, Mr. Always said, say, bruh, go check that shit out and call me if y'all are still going to the Z-Ball after the Super Bowl. You heard that? You know, bring that information, then you're going to ask them people if they're going to still go to the Super Bowl. Give him a call, though. Check it out. All right, I'll call you, and he said he's going to call him. Just, it don't make no sense. And Mr. Lucky Strike took off running for the block and a half. But by the time he got there, his wife, Shanika, and Mr. Camel Salem, the man that is helping Mrs. Shanika Palmer to cross the boulevard, their backs is now facing Mr. Lucky Strike. Mr. Lucky Strike Palmer continued running towards his wife, and the stranger, Mr. Camel, whose arm is still around Mrs. Palmer's waist. Mr. Lucky Strike is yelling as he runs towards his wife and Mr. Salem. Get your motherfucking hands off my wife. Lord help him, Lord. Forgive him for all the words that he's using. Wow. But when Mr. Salem slightly turned with his arm around Mrs. Palmer's waist, Mr. Lucky Strike did not waste no time. He flowed Mr. Camel in the head with a Mississippi Country Punch. Wow, I'd have heard of the Mississippi Country Punch, but I ain't got about hit by one. He was hit by one. A Mississippi Country Punch knocked the innocent man back into the St. Charles Street and his wife into Canal Boulevard. Mrs. Shanika Palmer started yelling, stop, stop. He was helping me cross the street because my ankle is broke. And I beep, bam, bam. Oh, looked like it caused something and ran over. Oh, no. And look at what you have caused to happen. No, Shanika, move this elephant car off my wife. Somebody help me get this car off my wife's head, please. Mr. Camel Salem and some bystanders helped Mr. Lucky Strike lift the U-Go car off Mrs. Shanika's head. And Mrs. Shanika is breathing but unconscious. Mr. Lucky said to Mr. Camel, I am sorry. Can you please forgive me? Then Mr. Camel said, yes, but you need to take this to God in prayer because your wife might not make it. Oh, here comes the police. I will tell them that you need the ambulance for your wife, and we'll let you handle it from here. My name is Camel Salem. My phone number is 504-555-5255. Call me if you need me. I pray that your wife survives okay. My name is Lucky Strike Paul Mall. I'll call you if I need you. Mr. Lucky Strike gets into the ambulance with his wife. When they arrive to the hospital, the EMs rushes Mrs. Lucky Strike to surgery while the police talk to Mr. Lucky Strike Paul Mall. The police said, this is a case that has to go in front of the judge because your wife was hit while she was crossing the street with you. That is when Mr. Lucky Strike said, me, officer? How do you know? because every witness says that. Officer Perk said, is this true or not? Right there left a whole mouthful. He got the cop confused whether or not the people telling the truth. You see? Check it out. Mr. Lucky Strike said, yes, that is the truth, because we were going to my mother-in-law house and we slipped down and Shanika went to the left and I went to the right. This is what happened. And it was a freak accident. Officer Perk said, okay, Mr. Lucky Strike, do you think the driver of that Yugo car is at fault? Mr. Lucky Strike said, no, Officer Perk. I hope my wife survives that freak accident because, like I said, we lost our balance when we ran across the street. Then Mr. Lucky Strike asked Officer Perk, who is the driver of the Yugo car? Officer Perk replied, his name is Mr. Poppy. Ain't that something, Mr. Poppy? Officer Perk said, now I can release Mr. Poppy because I have a statement from you saying that he is not at fault. But if your wife, Mrs. Shanika, does not survive this, we will have to take Mr. Poppy to jail for vehicular homicide and let the judge or jury decide this case. Then the doctor said to Mr. Lucky Strike, your wife's surgery went well. She has pins in her head, and her right arm and her left leg is in a cast. But she is in intensive care in a coma. Wow. But the surgery went well. But you can go to the 11th floor to see her through the glass panel for 1 hour. After Mr. Lucky Strike visited his wife in intensive care, he went home and he called his job to report the accident and to tell his supervisor that he will not be coming to work tomorrow. Well, those are the things that's going on in my figment of my imagination. So at the same time, what I can say here is I'm going to continue reading this because it's very interesting. And I hope you are enjoying this story. It is 9 a.m. and Officer Perk calls Mr. Lucky Strike to tell him that he has Mr. Poppy in custody for vehicular homicide. Mr. Lucky Strike said, no, not my wife. She is not dead. Officer Perk replied, yes, she is dead, and I have Mr. Poppy in custody. And there is a Majesty Court tomorrow morning for 10 a.m. Immediately after Mr. Lucky hung up with Officer Perk, he called Mr. Campbell Salem and asked for his support because his wife died. And can you be there in case I need a witness to say that my wife and I ran across the street and we slipped? Mr. Campbell said, wait, I am not going to say anything unless I am subpoenaed to court, because this is a person that I was trying to help, but now she is dead. Then Mr. Lucky Strike said, okay, and hung up the telephone. Now, Mr. Lucky Strike has to live with his wife being dead, but he has yet to tell his in-laws that his wife, Mrs. Shanika Paul Mall, is dead. Now, Mr. Lucky Strike found the courage to call his mother-in-law, Mrs. I'll Be There Whatever Love. Now, that's his mother-in-law's name. And she said, hello, Mrs. I'll Be There Love. Shanika is dead. That is when Mrs. Whatever Love said, what is this you are saying, Lucky? He responded, Shanika died last night, and I have to go to Majesty Court in the morning. Majesty Court? My daughter dead? Miss Whatever said,
No, my God, this has not happened to my only daughter. This is too much. I cannot take it. I cannot take this no more. My heart is hurting. Hello? Mother-in-law, Mrs. Whatever Love, hello? Are you there? The mother-in-law responded, help, help. Oh, the phone went busy. Oh, Mr. Lucky Strike started running through the house. Didn't know what to do. He knew he had to get out of there, though. Now, here we go. Mr. Lucky Strike heard a busy sound coming from the telephone. He hung up and dialed the neighbor next door to his mother-in-law and asked that someone go next door by Shanika Mom's house to see if Mrs. Whatever Love was all right. While the neighbor went to check on Mr. Lucky Strike's mother-in-law, Lucky Strike called a taxi so he can be dropped off by his mother-in-law's house. When Mr. Lucky Strike arrived to his mother-in-law's house, the neighbors wanted to know what happened because the ambulance just took Mrs. Whatever Love to the hospital. But immediately the neighbors asked, where's Shanika? Then Lucky Strike said, my wife was hit by a Yugo car yesterday and she died. That is when the neighbors started crying and they started howling and whooping. Mr. Lucky Strike quickly asked the taxi driver to drop him off at the hospital on Gravier Street to see if his mother-in-law is okay. About an hour later, the same doctor that did the surgery on his wife had to tell Mr. Lucky Strike that his mother-in-law had a massive heart attack. Then Mr. Lucky Strike Paul Mall got in a taxi and left the hospital. Wow, this is hard on him for believing whatever Mr. Dippin said. And went home and he cried all night. And at 1 a.m. he fell asleep. But that is when the police knocked at the door to arrest Lucky Strike for pushing his wife into the street. So when Mr. Lucky Strike opened the door, Officer Perk read him his rights and told him he is being arrested for his wife Shanika murder because a witness came forward saying they saw Mr. Lucky Strike run and push another man in the head who Shanika was walking and hugging, but she was knocked into Canal Boulevard by her husband, Mr. Lucky Strike. Wow, that's hard. And then the Yugo car ran over Mrs. Shanika, and the back tire stopped on her head after the car Yes, it is my first shot, but as I say, it's